Every once in a while, I have a chance to mention this. When folks have been a part of our church in the past, and they move away or out of the country or out of the city or whatever, job changes, lots of different reasons. When I think about these folks, I think about, you're not ex-members. It's sort of like you're alumni. And this morning out in the foyer, I had a really nice surprise. Jim Dice, there you are. Jim and Diana were a part of our church many, many years ago when we were meeting at the Boys and Girls Club. And our worship band consisted of me on an acoustic guitar. I think Amy Young, or Amy, what was her last name? Wilson, had a snare drum. That was our drum set, a snare drum.
And a trash can lid.
And then we had Jennifer that played piano when she was a little girl and decided that, this would help to play piano. But she was just kind of getting in this, if you kind of catch my drift. And the piano at the Boys and Girls Club was perpetually out of tune. So it was quite the motley crew leading worship. Well, one day, Jim had been saving money. I don't remember what it was for, saving money for something. And that afternoon, he was going to go to the store and buy it. And I was talking to Diana afterwards, and he thought, about our pitiful worship situation. And he went out and bought our first keyboard. What a difference that made for our folks. And I still remember what he told, I think he told Diana, he said, what better use of this money could there be than that? Anyway, so welcome back, alum. My father in the business world was eminently successful. He started as a U.S. Navy grad. When he got out of the Navy, he helped Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, when Fred was just starting out in Pittsburgh as a very local thing, just trying to get on a station somewhere. And my dad was helping him get started. And then I came along, my sister came along, and there wasn't enough money to pay for four of us now. And so my dad became a life insurance salesman. Now, what struck me about this all these many years is that he became a life insurance salesman without a car during the day. Now, this is a tough business because it's all commission. So what he did was he took a bus to downtown Pittsburgh every day. He was on the phone making as many appointments close by as he could, where he could walk or take a bus to an appointment. And then in the evening, he would take the bus home, and he would have some appointments that he would have the family car that he would do in the evenings. I still remember as just a little bitty kid sitting in our living room with my sister, just as preschoolers, and watching a film strip. And some of you are old enough to remember a film strip. And there was some kind of little recording device this was the training. This was how he got trained to do sales, was listening to this thing. And so it'd be a picture on the screen, and then a talking voice, and then it would go, beep. And my sister and I traded getting to push the button to go to the next slide. My dad did amazingly well in Pittsburgh. And then he was hired by a fairly large company in New Orleans, and we moved there. He became the sales director. He started, 3 years later, started his own outfit in Denver, mostly with car dealerships, doing all of their HR stuff. And I remember, then we moved to Houston. He was the vice president of a large company there. And one of the things that's always been in my mind that was just kind of like, wow, how does this happen, was every 2 years we went to a convention somewhere in the U.S. And my favorite one was we'd go to Colorado, and we were at the Broadmoor, which is an amazing place. And during that week, I just watched my dad with hundreds of people and families and kids and of all ages. And he was just like this magic man, where everybody just adored my dad. They loved him. But the companies that he led were always doing well, and that benefited the families, of course, financially. And it was just kind of one of these magical things. How do you do this, Dad? Well, he ended up becoming president of several companies, and then his last job was he was president of U.S. Life in Manhattan. I think there were 18 or 19 subsidiary companies that made up U.S. life. It was just an amazing job. And then near the end of his career, he moved to Pasadena, and a big career shift. And we had just moved here to Irvine to start our church. This was 1985. And I was having lunch with my dad one day, and he was asking me about how do you start a church and how does that happen? And we hadn't started worship yet. And I remember him saying to me, he said, "Son, I cannot imagine doing what you're trying to do." Now, given how I saw my father and this amazing man that waved his wand somehow, and companies went great, and families were happy about this, and just this atomic effect that went on, it was quite a statement to me. I was shocked that he said that. And I said, "Really?" He said, "Why do you say?" I said, "Why do you say that?" He said, "Seth, in my world, everybody does what I want them to do as president of the company because I pay them. If they don't do what I don't want them to do, in some of the jobs when I was younger, I would help them find another work. Beef up their resume, make some phone calls. But generally, everybody in the companies that I lead, they have to do what I say, or else they won't have a job. They won't have a paycheck." He said, "All of my work, mostly, is extrinsically motivated. And then, in addition to that, I try to do intrinsic motivation. What you're trying to do is the exact opposite of that. You are going to have people who you are not paying to come to your church, or not paying to run ministries, or to help out, or to serve in bigger things or smaller things. You're going to have very few people. Most of the people are going to serve as volunteers." He said, "That is a leadership challenge that I cannot fathom. How would you do that?" And when he said that, I thought, I think this is going to be harder than I thought. Kind of a sobering moment. Well, my dad was right. A church is not a business in some ways, and we have finances and we make decisions, and, we're a legal entity as that goes. But there are only 3 full-time employees here, and we have several part-time employees. Most of what happens at our church, either on Sunday or during the week, is because of people who are not being paid to do stuff. And the challenge of serving, doing something, investing your time, your talent, your effort, your heart to make a difference for reasons other than a paycheck. We are doing a sermon series on our heart attitudes. How do you create a community? What makes up a community? And for us, what we've looked at so far is put the success of others above your own. This is central in a church. It's central in a marriage. It's important if you're leading at work or you're a manager at work. Trying to create a sense of community. This is hugely important. Put the success of others above yourself. And that really comes down even just to the conversations that we have with people. The second one is an authentic life, that we try to be real about our lives here. Now, you don't have to be real about everything and put it out there in public, but there should be at least 1 or 2 people that you can talk to about things that you deal with. And we are a people who want to create that kind of environment where other people can open up and talk with you. That creates community. The third one we looked at last week is clear relationships. In every institution, whether it's a marriage with 2 people or with teenagers or adult, older family members, at work, in a church, you put people together, you're going to have conflict, just inevitable. But what we strive to do here is when we mess up, we fess up. Not some big, thing, but just humility that tries to take the brick that just got between me and you, and for me to pick up that brick and to throw it away by clearing relationships. Today we look at our fourth one, invest your time and talent. This is quite a challenge, as my dad noted to me many years ago. And particularly, I think, more so even in our time than when we started our church over 30 years ago. Because in Western civilization, individualism has become one of these paramount virtues, one of these paramount things that we all strive to be. And you hear this in things like when you graduate from, I want a job that utilizes my strengths. Or in the church, I want to do a ministry that involves my passion. I want to feel better now. Back when I started in ministry, the highest virtue of ministry was not, I want to be in a ministry that utilizes my passion, where I feel good about what I'm doing. The all-star, back when I started ministry, was almost the opposite. Pastor Seth, what needs to happen around here that's not getting done? I would like to sign up for that. Let me serve where I'm needed. That seems like such light years away in our culture. Who thinks like that? Individualism is a strong thing. The community is, less and less we think about community. And institutions like government or work or the church, there's a lot of contempt for institutions. And that flies against sort of this thing of investing your time and talent for the benefit of us and the people that come here. The second thing that flies against this, these headwinds that we are always running up against, is our own sin nature. I'm willing to serve as long as it's convenient, as long as it fits, as long as it doesn't put too much stress on them. It's sort of like, that's kind of the last thing that I'll do if everything else matches up. And I think all of us deal with that. I certainly deal with that in my own version of that. But the idea of investing your time and talent, it's important to create community. All of us hunger for two things. We hunger for connection and a sense of belonging, and we also hunger to make a difference with our life. Now, where these two hungers come together is in service. And in our church, when I think of this is, we pull the wagon. It's not Seth pulls the wagon. It's not Lance pulls the wagon, or Mark pulls the wagon, or Sarah, or Bart, or Allie. It's we. This is we as a group, as a community, help pull the wagon. And that's what helps to create connection. But we not just create value and connection by serving. We extend this. We extend community to people. And that's something that has to be built. And it happens in the foyer. It happens on the patio. It happens at work with your neighbors. We build community. We extend community. Both those things are important. One of the things when I think about a church, I always think about a restaurant. Last night, Mindy and Louise and I went to a restaurant and movie afterwards. What was the name of that movie we saw? Overcomer. Was that it? What a great movie. If you're looking for a nice, feel-good, wow, gospel-centered movie, go see that one. So we went to a restaurant, and we sort of, like most of you, we walk in the door, we stand there, we wait for a table. There's a maitre d'. Usually don't think about talking to the maitre d' or the hostess. We go to our table, the server comes over and takes your drink orders. Thank you so much. Comes back and have you decided what you'd like to order? And we make our food order. And then later on the food comes and we eat the food and we pay the bill and we get up to go. And most of the time, by the time we get to the car, we are now critiquing what just happened. How was the food? How was the service? How was the attitude of those people who were serving? How was the hotness of or the freshness of the food how was the parking? How was the maitre d'? Will we ever go back to this restaurant? It's easy to sort of have that same mentality when you go to a church. But folks, in our church, we are the maitre d's. We are the cooks. We are the coffee makers. We are the servants. We are the bus boys. We open the store. We close the store. That's who we are. We are not, first of all, the people who are come to be served. our mentality in building a community is the exact opposite of going to a restaurant. There's a great parable that I'd like us to walk through. It's called the parable of the talents that Jesus talked about. And there are several reasons why I love this parable, and Adam alluded to this in his remarks about hope. In this world, we use the word hope, our culture uses the word hope, with something that we hope will happen in our immediate future. And there's a sense in which that use of that word is fine. But as Christians, when we think of the word hope, we think about what's coming on the other side of this life. The big dance that's coming. And that all of the things that we do here in our short time here are going to make a difference. And we may not see that very clearly until we're on the other side of this life. But when we see it, we're going to look back on this life with very different eyes than we did now. Why should I invest my life? There are 6 principles that strike me from this parable of the talents. Ownership. God owns us. The parable starts off with an owner. And he has, we're not really told what he owns, but just reading between the lines, he probably has some farm, some crops going on. He probably has some herds and some ranch issues. And I think by inference, you can read into this, he has some investments that he's making. And the scripture says it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants. And the parable is going to have 3 servants, and he's going to tell these guys what to do with his assets. He's going to have them manage these assets while he's gone. And the thing that strikes you at the beginning of the parable is that the owner in the parable is God himself. And the 3 servants are 3 different kinds of people or 3 different kinds of responses to the owner. Now, this is something that we really don't think about that much. But in Psalm 24:1, the psalmist says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it and all who live in it." We don't think of ourselves as being owned. Perhaps we think of ourselves as being created. But the inference in the parable is that God is the owner of us and all that we are set to manage. Psalm 100, verse 3, "Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us, and we are his." We are the sheep of his pasture. The second principle is God entrusts us with what is his. And the Bible has a nice word for it, stewardship. It's also a word that we use in our financial world as well. Again, it would be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. And so again, just in my imagination, as I try to color in the story, I can imagine there's a guy who's in charge of the farm and the crops, and there's a manager that's in charge of the fields and the ranch and the animals and the flocks. And there's a guy who's managing the assets and making investments, and he's getting ready to go. Now, it was clear, it should have been clear to these 3 men that none of the things that they were going to be managing belonged to them. That should have been a no-brainer. The owner owned these things. I don't own them. And yet, in our world, as in our sin nature, we just naturally think the opposite. I'm the owner. What's mine is mine. God has no call on what is mine. If we were there and we were asking Jesus about this, we might be startled at his answer here, particularly as he continues to tell the parable. When I think about this, I think I have a job. Most of you have a job too. Do I think of my job as something that God owns and I'm a stewardship of how I work, why I work, when I work? We get a paycheck. Is that paycheck mine? Or am I to be a steward of the paycheck that I worked hard, I'm going to decide what I do with it. Well, that's person number 3 in our sermon. I think for some of us with men, you think about you have a computer. Maybe the computer actually belongs to God, and maybe I can't do with my computer just what I want to do. There's an idea. We've been entrusted with people. If you're married, you've been entrusted with your spouse. If you have children, entrusted with them. If you're A life group leader in our church, you've been entrusted with people to shepherd them. They do not belong to you. They belong to God. And one day I will answer to how I stewarded the things that God gave me. Now, the third principle is diversity. God gave these three guys different gifts or different amounts of talents. To one, he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Now, we sang a song, it's kind of our theme song this year, Dream Big and Act Small. And the theme of the song and our theme is that we all want to do something big for the Lord. But generally speaking, it always seems to me that the things that we do seem to us so small, so trivial. And after a while, we just sort of internally ask, even if we're not even aware of the words, is it really worth it? Does what I do really make a difference? Now, he gave different talents, 5 to one, 2 for another, 1 for the other. But one of the things that strikes me about this is that some of the greatest people God used in the scripture all looked at themselves as the 1 talent person. If that. For example, Moses. When God calls to Moses from the burning bush, his was to go to Egypt and talk to Pharaoh. Moses was like, you got to be kidding. Me? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? I'm a nothing. I'm a nobody. What kind of credibility do I have to do this? It seemed to him like an overwhelming task, and that the resources at his hand were minuscule. Another example is Gideon, one of my favorite people in the Bible. I love Gideon. I relate to Gideon. So God tells him, go in the strength you have and save Midian out of my hand. Am I not sending you? He calls him a strong, mighty warrior. And Gideon's going, you showed up at the wrong address. You know, that's not me. I'm the least in my family. We're the least in the clan. You know, you got the wrong guy. In verse 14, let me just read this. Go in the strength you have, save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? But Lord, Gideon asked, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh. I am the least in my family. To him, it seemed like the resources that he had available and within himself were minuscule. There's no chance of him being able to do this. Jeremiah, God calls Jeremiah to be a prophet. God says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Jeremiah, sovereign Lord, I do not know how to speak. I am only a child. That's how it seemed to him. That's how it seems to you in trying to serve the Lord. Some of you are on our kids' church team that go, and you're back there once a month on a Sunday. Some of you make coffee for us once a Sunday. Dave and Kenitha are up in our office on Friday. Dave's up there on Friday, and Kenitha joins him on Saturday to print up the bulletins, all the things, the paper you have, to print it up, fold it, make sure it's ready for. You know, it's easy to look at those kinds of things. I just do this little part. Now, you would think, maybe, that, well, for the pastor, it's different. You must come to work and think, wow, God is really using my life in big ways, but I'm not a pastor, so I'll come and watch you do your thing. Every day, without fail, the questions that rumble through my mind is, does my life make all that much difference? It seems to this finite creature with finite eyes and finite vision that what I do sometimes just seems so small. You just kind of want to, okay, I'll show up tomorrow. Well, that's how these guys felt, these all-star guys. God gives different gifts. I think he does this to humble us and for us to depend on him. Number 4, the principle of accountability. God settles accounts. After a long time, Jesus says, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. Now, our culture is really not very excited about this principle, that one day God is going to judge us on how we did. I don't know, I guess we just assume that God is immoral judge or an unjust judge. But this principle of accountability runs all through our culture. I just finished, on the cusp of October, getting all my numbers done for our taxes that were supposed to be filed April 15th, but the extension goes to October 15th. So this year, I'm meeting with my accountant in about next week, and so we have 11 days, whatever mistakes are made, I haven't figured, to answer before I get in. Now, that's been going on for years. I've been through 3 audits, none in about the last 25 or 30 years. And in every audit, I'm a good record keeper. I had all my stuff there. And one of the auditors one time said, "Mr. Gatch, I have no idea why you're in here." I said, I think the most I had to pay was $100 because I didn't have some receipts, a few receipts for stuff. That accountability. We were held accountable by the court system and by the police to do what is right. There are a lot of our finances, CPAs, accountability is a part of our life, but for some reason we think that for God to do that is somehow beneath him. That's not beneath him. You and I need that sense of accountability to keep us moving forward, leaning in on investing ourselves. The man who had received 5 talents brought the other 5. "Master, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more." When I think about this particular aspect of accountability, the thing I think about periodically is I have a feeling one day God is going to ask me in a friendly way, "What did you do with what I entrusted to you?" It's sort of like what happens at the end of a grade school period when the report cards come out. When your parents used to ask you, "Now, how did you do on your report card?" Accountability. The 5th one is reward. God rewards us for our investments. I love this. He tells the 5-talent person and the 2-talent person who doubled their income, doubled the money, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, just like the small things, just how things seem, the same theme. Things seem small. With a few things, I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." And what I think of here is that there are the hunger in the human heart, the longing that we have to want to know that our life mattered, that our life made a difference, that we contributed something to the well-being of the world or my small part of the world. And then the other thing that we just hunger for, and sometimes it just seems just a half inch beneath the surface, is validation. There's something in us that wants to be validated. And we try to validate ourselves. And we hope that other people will validate what we do. And there's nothing wrong with that unless we're depending on that. Then we will become a slave to that and set ourselves up for much needed discouragement. The validation that Jesus talks about here comes from God. That's the validation that matters. Every other validation from either looking in the mirror or hearing some kind words from people is sort of like our June gloom. We walk outside and it's kind of foggy and hazy, but by noon, it's all gone. Personal validation is a lot like that. There are 4 things that strike me, that strike our human soul, our heart, about what Jesus is saying to the 5 and the 2-talent people here in our world. The first is impact. We want to make an impact, and we want some affirmation. We hope for some affirmation. The owner gives that to the 5-talent and the 2-talent guy. We want to know that we've had some influence with people, and there's a sense of appreciation. That happens here, spoken in the parable. A sense of investment, that I use the talents and the gifts that I had to try to make a difference with people. And it made a difference, not just to others, but to me. I also benefited from serving the Lord. And intimacy or affection. And the last part of this, I think, is just the one that we just kind of skip over. Come and share your master's happiness. Shared happiness. with the Lord himself. What else can fill the soul than that? The last principle from the parable is loss, is that God removes what we will not invest. Now, the third guy shows up and to describe, what did he do, what had been invested or entrusted to him. And he says, the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, I knew that you are a hard man. You already go, uh-oh, this is not going to end well. Imagine calling your boss, you're a hard man. Harvesting where you've not sown, gathering where you've not scattered, meaning you're not fair. I really can't count on you to be fair in this accounting. Ooh. So I was afraid, an excuse, fear of failure. Why should I try? I might mess this up. I might screw it up. I went out and hid your talent in the ground. At least I didn't lose it. I played it safe. So hopefully there should be nothing that you can say against me upon what I did. And yet this man is quite shocked by what happens. Everything that's been given to him, the one talent is taken away and given to the guy with 5 talents. You wicked, lazy servant, take the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10. Throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, all of us deal with, in one sense, we're a 1-talent person. We have our excuses, we have our go-tos, maybe in this season of life, maybe when there's less stress, maybe when life isn't so hard, maybe if I have a little bit more time, maybe I can do something occasionally. In one sense, we will always deal with that still in the corruption of who we are. And God is slowly changing that in us. On the back of your handout, there are 5 ways that strike me that you can invest your life. Number 1 is investing your time. Ephesians 5:15 and 16. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of the opportunity because the days are evil. Or the idea is the days are short. We only have a certain amount of time here. And the word that is translated here as opportunity is one of 2 Greek words that can be translated from time. One of the words, chronos, is the chronology, is what we usually think of the time, that kind of time. But this particular Greek word has to do with opportunity. The opportunity that is set before you, that we have a chance to grasp, to cling to, and to take. Time. Second is invest your talents. Each one should use whatever gift he has received to serve others, faithfully administering the gifts that God has given to him. We have spiritual gifts, but they're not for my benefit, and they're not for your benefit. They're for the benefit of other people. Talents. Sometimes we have spiritual gifts. God's people have spiritual gifts. Sometimes we have abilities. We have a few ladies in our church that make amazing chocolate chip cookies. Now, I benefit from those periodically, of which I'm happy. But some of your neighbors might too, or some of the people at work. A talent. Invest your treasure. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal. Store up treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust can mess that up, and thieves can come in and break and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. It's one of those strange paradoxes where I want my heart to be different. And in this case, what he says is my heart partly will follow the money. What I invest out of me, my heart in some measure will follow our treasure. Number 4, invest your thoughtfulness. Or your tongue, invest your tongue. And here I think about conversations. If anyone speaks, he should do as one speaking the very words of God. If anyone serves, do it with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised. We don't have coffee time around here just because I like coffee. We have coffee time and some great refreshments, hopefully, so that people stick around for 5 or 10 minutes, and we get a chance to talk to them and meet them. That is opportunity for you to invest something of thoughtfulness and your time, your tongue, in conversation to help give them a sense of what is it like to be a part of this community. And then finally, invest your thoughtfulness. And everything do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. Golden rule. What do I wish somebody would do for me? What do I wish somebody would say to me? It's a good question. But then I'm to turn that question around is, I wonder if somebody else needs what I think I need. Maybe I'm on the horse looking for somebody else to be an encouragement to have a good word of hope to. All of us have a longing for belonging. But belonging doesn't happen over a long period of time just by coming to a church on Sunday. I go to Chili's every Tuesday for lunch. I really don't belong to Chili. I really don't feel a sense of belonging as much as I try. I've met about 40 or 50 servers and hostesses at Chili's. And I try to remember their name. I try to call them by name when I'm over there. But there's not really a sense of belonging that I wonder about. Because belonging isn't just about conversations and relationships, connections, but it's also about serving. This happens when we pull the wagon, whatever it is, small or great. A sense of belonging happens not because other people necessarily extend that to you, but because you grab a handle and you start to pull and then invite others to pull the wagon with you. A lot of the things that we do seem small. And like I said to you, I fight that all the time. I don't trust my eyes. I don't trust how things seem to me. I've learned that's a bad idea. What if the opposite was actually true? What if the smallest thing that you did for somebody else was actually going to become a huge thing to other people down the road? What if that were true? Would that change how I act now? Would that change how I think about this? Jesus said, a cup of cold water in my name will not be forgotten. Some of the things we're going to do, 30 will multiply 30, 60, 100-fold. We have some amazing promises of what's coming on the other side of heaven, as Adam alluded to. What if those things were true, just like Jesus said, and just like this parable teaches us? And what if someday you walk into heaven and you look and you're able to see for the first time not how things seem, but how things became because of what you did? I have a feeling that we're going to have jaws drop. We're going to be in awe. Our eyes are going to be filled with tears. We are going to be filled with wonder. God, what I did seems so small. And look what you did with it, with people. And I think that's part of what's going to prompt us to worship God. How could you do something like that with just such small peanuts on my part? And I think there'll be another sense in which we will look back with holy regret, not discouraged regret, but like, I really wish I'd taken more advantages of the opportunities I had in that short life that I lived way back then. This is what the parable of the talent says to me in a personal way. This is how it encourages me. And I hope it encourages you to grasp the opportunity and invest yourself while you can. Let's pray together. Father, the headwinds that we fight are stiff sometimes. I just want what's convenient. I just want my comfort. Comfort first, convenience first, then if there's time left over. And yet, down deep in our souls, there's something much deeper. We hunger for our life to make a difference. We hunger for our life to be useful. We hunger that in the small things that I do, when wrapped together with the other small, seemingly small things that other people do, the collective effect of that is way bigger than just the small thing that I do. We hunger for that. We yearn for that. God, help us to see that. Help us to hear the parable afresh, to plant our flag, not in this world, but in the next, and what this parable promises to us if we will invest what you've entrusted to us.